Picture this absolute nightmare scenario. It's Memorial Day weekend 2025 in Surprise, Arizona. A woman named Kendall Rasmussen displays a simple tribute to honor her beloved brother, U.S. Army Sergeant John Kyle Daggett, who was killed in action in Iraq in 2008 at just 21 years old. Her memorial consists of an American flag and a magnetic poster on her garage door that reads, "Freedom is not free. Remembering my brother, Sergeant John Kyle Daggett, September 30, 1986 to May 15, 2008, U.S. Army, Airborne Ranger." On May 7th, just days before Memorial Day, Kendall receives a letter from her HOA management company. But this isn't a letter of appreciation for honoring a fallen American hero. This isn't recognition of her brother's ultimate sacrifice for freedom. This is a demand to remove her memorial because corporate managers have classified her tribute to a fallen soldier as a nuisance and compared it to dead plants, dead trees, and bushes. Let that sink in completely. Corporate HOA managers looked at a memorial honoring a 21-year-old American Airborne Ranger who died defending freedom in Iraq, and they classified his memory as equivalent to yard waste requiring immediate removal. This is the story of Kendall Rasmussen, a sister who has spent over a decade fighting corporate entities that view memorials to fallen American heroes as aesthetic violations. Her battle represents every military family's fight to honor their fallen loved ones against management companies that treat patriotism as property management problems and Gold Star families as enforcement targets. This isn't just about one HOA attacking one family. This is about corporate America's systematic war against military remembrance, patriotic expression, and the sacred obligation to never forget those who died defending our freedom. Chapter 1. The Brother Who Gave Everything for America. John Kyle Daggett was born on September 30th, 1986, into a family that understood service, sacrifice, and love of country. From an early age, he dreamed of wearing the uniform and serving the nation he loved with every fiber of his being. He wasn't drafted or forced into service. He chose to defend America because he believed deeply in the values of freedom, liberty, and justice that define what this country stands for. When John enlisted in the U.S. Army and earned his place among the elite Airborne Rangers, he joined the ranks of America's finest warriors who volunteer for the most dangerous missions in defense of freedom. Rangers lead the way into hostile territory, take on impossible odds, and accomplish missions that others cannot. John Kyle Daggett embodied everything that makes America's military the greatest force for good in human history. On May 15, 2008, during Operation Iraqi Freedom, Sergeant John Kyle Daggett made the ultimate sacrifice for his country when he was killed in action at just 21 years old. He died thousands of miles from home, fighting enemies of freedom so that Americans could continue living in safety and prosperity. His death represents the price that young Americans pay so that others can enjoy the blessings of liberty that define life in the United States. John's sacrifice wasn't just the loss of one young soldier. It was the loss of everything he could have become, every dream he might have achieved, every family moment he would never experience. He gave up his future so that other Americans could have theirs. He traded his tomorrow for our today. This is what military sacrifice means, and this is why memorials to fallen soldiers matter more than corporate aesthetic preferences. For his sister Kendall, losing John wasn't just personal tragedy. It was the loss of a hero whose memory deserved to be honored and preserved for as long as she drew breath. My brother really loved his country, and I'm very proud, and that's really the point. Kendall explains with the quiet dignity of someone who understands that some things transcend corporate convenience and management company policies. Every year, the month of May becomes a sacred time of remembrance for Kendall, as she honors her brother's sacrifice and reflects on the permanent hole his absence has left in her family. "It's been interesting navigating life without him," she says. capturing the ongoing grief that Gold Star families carry while the rest of America goes about their normal routines, protected by the sacrifice of heroes they never knew. The memorial that Kendall has maintained for over a decade isn't elaborate or expensive. It's a simple magnetic poster reading, "Freedom is not free, remembering my brother, Sergeant John Kyle Daggett, September 30, 1986 to May 15, 2008, U.S. Army Airborne Ranger," accompanied by American flags and patriotic decorations. The display serves as a daily reminder that freedom requires sacrifice and that some Americans pay the ultimate price for liberty. This memorial represents Kendall's sacred promise to her fallen brother that his sacrifice will never be forgotten. His service will always be honored, and his memory will live on despite corporate entities that view remembering heroes as aesthetic violations. For her, maintaining this tribute isn't optional or seasonal. It's a moral obligation that transcends HOA rules and management company preferences. But Kendall lives in corporate-controlled America, where private entities have acquired the power to regulate patriotic expression and demand removal of tributes to fallen soldiers. Her decade-long battle to preserve her brother's memorial has revealed the systematic corporate hostility to military remembrance that threatens every Gold Star family and HOA communities across the nation. Chapter 2. The Corporate Declaration of War Against American Heroes, the latest corporate assault on Kendall Rasmussen's memorial to her fallen brother, began with a letter that should shock every American who believes military sacrifice deserves respect and remembrance. On May 7, 2025, just days before Memorial Day weekend, when America traditionally honors its war dead, the new HOA management company sent Kendall a notice that revealed the complete absence of human decency in corporate property management. The letter didn't just demand removal of Sergeant John Kyle Daggett's memorial, it classified his tribute as a nuisance and explicitly compared honoring a fallen American hero to maintaining dead plants, dead trees, and bushes. Corporate managers looked at a memorial to a 21-year-old airborne ranger who died defending freedom and decided it belonged in the same category as yard waste requiring disposal. They put it in comparison with dead plants, dead trees, and bushes, and it was kind of offensive to have it be in this comparison of what they're calling a nuisance, Kendall said, capturing the outrage that every decent American should feel. When corporate entities show such contempt for military sacrifice and fallen heroes. The timing of this corporate attack makes it even more offensive and reveals the complete tone deafness of management companies that prioritize administrative convenience over human decency. Launching an assault on a Gold Star family's memorial during the most sacred week for military remembrance demonstrates either deliberate hostility to military values or shocking ignorance about what Memorial Day means to military families. Tawa. Corporate justification for attacking Sergeant Daggett's memorial was that the poster had been displayed for several months and was therefore classified as a permanent exterior feature rather than temporary decoration. This bureaucratic reasoning treats memorials to fallen soldiers like Christmas lights or Halloween decorations that must be removed according to arbitrary corporate schedules. Think about the absurdity of this corporate logic. Military sacrifice isn't seasonal. Grief doesn't follow HOA calendars. The death of a 21-year-old soldier defending America isn't temporary decoration that should be removed after corporate-approved time periods. John Kyle Daggett died permanently, and his sister's obligation to remember him is permanent, not subject to management company scheduling preferences. The HOA rule requiring decorations to be displayed only 30 days before holidays and removed 10 days afterward creates an insulting framework that treats honoring fallen heroes the same way as hanging seasonal decorations. This corporate reduction of military remembrance to administrative categories reveals fundamental disrespect for the meaning and importance of Gold Star families' sacred obligations. The corporate surveillance that enabled this attack proves that Management company employees are paid to monitor residents' patriotic expressions and identify potential violations rather than appreciate displays that honor military service. Someone was specifically watching Kendall's memorial and calculating duration to generate enforcement actions against a Gold Star family. The classification of military memorials as nuisances represents a fundamental attack on American values by corporate entities that benefit from the freedom and security that military service provides, while showing contempt for the soldiers who make that freedom possible. This isn't property management. It's corporate hostility to the values that define America. The demand for immediate removal before Memorial Day weekend proves that corporate managers either don't understand or don't care about the significance of military remembrance during the most important time of year for honoring fallen soldiers. Their timing couldn't have been more insulting to families who have lost loved ones in service to America. Smash that like button if this corporate disrespect for fallen heroes is making your blood boil. The next chapter reveals how Kendall fought back before. Chapter 3. The first battle that proved resistance. Works Kendall Rasmussen's current fight isn't her first battle against corporate entities that view honoring fallen soldiers as aesthetic violations requiring elimination. In 2018, she faced a nearly identical attack from a different HOA management company, proving that corporate hostility to military memorials is systematic rather than isolated, and that successful resistance can force management companies to respect military sacrifice. The 2018 assault began when the previous HOA management company issued Kendall a $500 fine for displaying the same memorial poster honoring Sergeant John Kyle Daggett that corporate managers are attacking today. That fine represented significant financial hardship for many families and demonstrated corporate willingness to use economic warfare against Gold Star families who dare to honor their fallen heroes. But Kendall refused to surrender her sacred obligation to remember her brother, and her principled resistance inspired broader community support that would ultimately force the management company to retreat from their attack on military remembrance. Her courage in fighting corporate harassment despite facing financial penalties proved that individual determination can challenge systematic abuse when people refuse to submit quietly. The turning point came when supporters launched an online Change.org petition demanding that the HOA allow Kendall to maintain her memorial to her fallen brother. The petition resonated with Americans who understood that honoring military sacrifice should take precedence over corporate aesthetic preferences, and that Gold Star families deserve community support rather than systematic harassment. The petition garnered over 1,100 signatures from people across the country who recognized that Kendall's fight represented every military family's struggle to honor fallen loved ones against corporate entities that treat patriotic expression as property management. Problems. This overwhelming support proved that most Americans still value military sacrifice despite corporate attempts to eliminate memorials from their communities. The flood of petition signatures and accompanying public pressure forced the management company to recognize that their attack on military remembrance was generating negative publicity and community backlash that threatened their business interests. When corporate entities face organized resistance and public accountability, they often discover that harassing Gold Star families isn't profitable or sustainable. The successful petition campaign resulted in a comprehensive accommodation that allowed Kendall to maintain her memorial during multiple patriotic holidays, including Memorial Day, Independence Day, Labor Day, and Veterans Day. This arrangement recognized that military remembrance deserves special protection during times when America honors its service members and celebrates the freedom they defend. The grace period system that emerged from the compromise allowed Kendall to maintain displays between approved holidays, providing practical recognition that memorials to fallen soldiers shouldn't be treated like seasonal decorations requiring constant removal and reinstallation. This showed respect for ongoing grief and remembrance obligations that Gold Star families carry permanently. The 2018 victory established important precedents that should have protected Kendall's memorial from future corporate attacks while demonstrating that organized public resistance can defeat management company hostility to military remembrance. The success proved that corporate entities will retreat when faced with sufficient community pressure and negative publicity. The conditional approval letter that resulted from the 2018 campaign specifically protected Kendall's memorial during extended periods covering multiple patriotic holidays, creating legal documentation that should have prevented future harassment over the same displays that had been explicitly approved after community advocacy. The fact that Kendall regularly cooperated with the compromise arrangement by taking down and replacing displays between approved holidays demonstrated her good faith effort to balance community accommodation with her sacred obligation to honor her brother's sacrifice. Her cooperation proved that reasonable solutions exist when management companies show respect for military families. Chapter 4. The Power of American Outrage Against Corporate Disrespect. When Kendall Rasmussen decided to fight back against the new management company's attack on her Memorial Day display, she discovered that the American people's respect for military sacrifice remained stronger than corporate attempts to eliminate patriotic expression from their communities. Her decision to share her story publicly unleashed a wave of outrage that forced rapid corporate retreat and proved the power of community resistance. Kendall's social media post about the HOA's demand to remove Sergeant Daggett's memorial on a local neighborhood group page generated immediate and overwhelming support from neighbors, veterans, military families, and patriotic Americans who understood that honoring fallen soldiers should take precedence over corporate aesthetic preferences. The response demonstrated that while management companies view military memorials as nuisances, actual communities recognize them as sacred obligations deserving protection. Local news outlets quickly picked up Kendall's story and began reporting on the corporate attack against her Memorial Day display, transforming a local HOA dispute into a national story about management company hostility to military remembrance. The media coverage exposed the corporate disrespect to audiences far beyond the immediate neighborhood and generated widespread criticism of the company's insensitive treatment of a Gold Star family. The negative publicity created by Kendall's social media post and subsequent news coverage forced the management company to confront the public relations nightmare they had created by attacking a memorial to a fallen American hero during Memorial Day weekend. Corporate entities that depend on community reputation suddenly faced widespread condemnation for their treatment of military sacrifice. The intensity of public criticism prompted the management company to conduct belated research into the history of Kendall's displays and discover the 2018 conditional approval letter that had protected her brother's memorial during patriotic holidays. This convenient discovery revealed that the corporate attack had been launched without basic due diligence about existing protections for military remembrance. Within just days of the initial attack, the management company sent Kendall a follow-up email claiming their intention was not to cause frustration or overlook the significance of the display. This complete reversal from their previous classification of the memorial as a nuisance demonstrated the power of public accountability in forcing corporate respect for military sacrifice when management companies face organized resistance. The corporate claim that they were unaware of the previous approval for Kendall's memorial reveals either incompetent transition procedures when management companies change or deliberate ignorance about existing accommodations for military families. Either explanation demonstrates systematic corporate disregard for Gold Star families and community agreements that protect military remembrance. The management company's attempt to blame their software system for classifying military memorials as nuisances represents a pathetic effort to avoid responsibility for human decisions while deflecting accountability for institutional disrespect toward fallen soldiers. This excuse reveals how corporate systems are designed to treat military remembrance as administrative problems rather than sacred obligations. the corporate apology stating they regret the category for which our software system classified this courtesy notice, and claiming, in no way do we feel the gravity of honoring a fallen soldier family member falls into the nuisance category, directly contradicted their previous letter that explicitly compared Sergeant Daggett's memorial to dead plants requiring disposal. The speed of the corporate retreat, from demanding removal to apologizing and allowing the display within just a few days, proved that management company attacks on military memorials are based on convenience rather than principle and can be defeated through public pressure and organized community resistance when Americans unite to defend military families. The fact that the management company received death threats over their attack on Kendall's memorial, while inappropriate and condemned, indicates the intensity of public anger generated by corporate disrespect for fallen soldiers and suggests that future attacks on military memorials will face strong community resistance across the country. Chapter 5. The Neighbors Who Prove America Still Honors Heroes. While corporate HOA managers classified Kendall Rasmussen's memorial to her fallen brother as a nuisance requiring elimination, her neighbors in the Desert Oasis community demonstrated the kind of patriotic solidarity and human decency that makes effective resistance possible. The overwhelming neighbor support for Sergeant Daggett's memorial reveals the fundamental disconnect between corporate management priorities and the values of actual Americans who understand the importance of honoring military sacrifice. When Arizona's family reporters interviewed residents throughout the community about the management company's demand for memorial removal, they found unanimous support for Kendall's tribute and complete disagreement with corporate attempts to eliminate expressions of patriotism and military remembrance from their neighborhood. These conversations proved that the attack on Sergeant Daggett's memorial didn't represent community sentiment, but arbitrary corporate preferences. One particularly meaningful gesture of neighbor solidarity came from a resident who gifted Kendall an American flag, demonstrating practical support for her effort to honor her fallen brother while creating visible opposition to corporate attempts to eliminate patriotic displays from their community. This flag represents the kind of neighbor-to-neighbor cooperation that builds strong communities and protects military families from institutional harassment. The neighbor who provided the flag told reporters that he wouldn't mind if Kendall kept. Her memorial poster displayed all year long, explicitly rejecting the corporate logic that treats military remembrance as temporary decoration subject to arbitrary removal schedules. His position reflects widespread understanding that fallen soldiers deserve permanent remembrance rather than corporate scheduled recognition that treats heroes like holiday decorations. The visible display of American flags throughout the neighborhood in support of Kendall created community-wide resistance to corporate authority and demonstrated collective solidarity with military families facing harassment over patriotic expressions. When entire neighborhoods rally behind Gold Star families, management companies face organized opposition rather than isolated individuals they can intimidate. The willingness of neighbors to speak publicly in support of Kendall's memorial, despite knowing they might face retaliation from the same management company that had attacked her family, demonstrates the courage and community solidarity that effective resistance requires. These neighbors understood that defending military families protects everyone from corporate overreach and arbitrary enforcement. The organic nature of neighbor support, emerging without organized campaigns or formal leadership, proves that respect for military sacrifice remains strong in American communities, despite corporate attempts to eliminate expressions of patriotism through systematic harassment of military families and arbitrary classification of patriotic displays as aesthetic violations. The contrast between neighbor support and corporate hostility reveals the fundamental disconnect between community values and management company priorities. While actual residents appreciate expressions of patriotism and military remembrance that honor fallen heroes, corporate entities view them as administrative problems, requiring elimination through enforcement actions that generate revenue and demonstrate authority. The practical assistance that neighbors provided, from American flags to public statements supporting Kendall's right to honor her brother, demonstrates effective strategies for protecting military families from corporate harassment while building community solidarity around shared values of patriotism and respect for military sacrifice that transcend management company preferences. The neighbor response to Kendall's situation provides a template for other communities facing corporate attacks on military memorials, and proves that residents can successfully defend military families when they unite around shared values rather than submit to management company demands that treat honoring heroes as aesthetic violations. The widespread neighbor support that Kendall received throughout her battle demonstrates that corporate characterizations of military memorials as nuisances don't reflect actual community sentiment, but represent arbitrary management preferences that prioritize administrative convenience over human decency and patriotic values that define American communities. The fact that neighbors viewed Kendall's memorial as a positive contribution to their community rather than a problem requiring elimination proves that management companies don't represent the residents they claim to serve when they attack military families and demand removal of tributes to fallen American heroes. Chapter 6. The Systematic Corporate War Against Military Remembrance. Kendall Rasmussen's repeated battles to preserve her memorial to Sergeant John Kyle Daggett aren't isolated incidents, but part of a systematic pattern of corporate hostility to military memorials, patriotic displays, and expressions of support for fallen soldiers that reveals fundamental conflicts between management company priorities and American values of military remembrance that should be sacred and protected. The fact that Kendall has faced harassment from two different HOA management companies over the exact same memorial proves that corporate disrespect for military sacrifice is an institutional problem rather than individual management mistakes or misunderstandings. When multiple companies consistently attack identical memorials to fallen soldiers, it demonstrates systematic corporate hostility to military remembrance. Similar cases documented across the country reveal widespread management company attacks on veterans' flag displays, military memorials, and patriotic expressions that expose corporate prioritization of aesthetic control over respect for military service and sacrifice. From Texas soldiers forbidden to display American flags to veterans facing fines for honoring fallen comrades, the pattern shows systematic corporate disregard for military values. The corporate classification of military memorials as nuisances, comparable to landscaping problems, reflects a business mindset that treats expressions of patriotism and military remembrance as administrative violations rather than sacred obligations deserving special protection and community support. This represents fundamental corporate misunderstanding of military sacrifice and its meaning to American families. The timing patterns of corporate attacks on military memorials, often occurring during patriotic holidays when military remembrance should be most protected and celebrated, reveals either deliberate hostility to military values or complete tone deafness about the significance of these occasions for military families and American communities that should honor rather than harass Gold Star families. The bureaucratic justifications that management companies use to attack military memorials, duration limits, aesthetic standards, and administrative categories demonstrate how corporate thinking reduces military sacrifice to filing problems, rather than recognizing the human meaning and community importance of honoring fallen soldiers who died defending American freedom. The corporate resistance to accommodating military memorials, even when faced with public pressure and overwhelming community support, reveals management company priorities that place administrative convenience above respect for military families and fallen heroes. This resistance demonstrates systematic rather than accidental disrespect for military sacrifice and patriotic expression. The legal frameworks that enable corporate attacks on military memorials through HOA authority over property aesthetics and community standards create systematic vulnerabilities for military families who face potential harassment regardless of the patriotic nature or community importance of their displays honoring fallen loved ones. The economic incentives that drive corporate attacks on military memorials through violation generation and enforcement fees create financial motivations for management companies to treat patriotic expressions as revenue opportunities rather than community assets deserving protection and support from neighbors who understand their importance. The lack of legal protections specifically safeguarding military memorials from corporate harassment leaves Gold Star families vulnerable to systematic abuse by management companies that prioritize aesthetic control over respect for military sacrifice and fallen heroes who gave their lives for American freedom. The pattern of corporate retreat when faced with public pressure and negative publicity proves that attacks on military memorials are based on convenience rather than principle and can be defeated through organized resistance and community solidarity. That challenges management company priorities and demands respect for military families. The psychological impact on military families facing corporate attacks on their memorials to fallen loved ones creates additional trauma for people already dealing with grief and loss, while destroying community trust and respect for institutions that should support rather than harass those who have sacrificed for American freedom and security. The broader implications of corporate hostility to military memorials extend beyond individual families to community values and national respect for military service, creating cultural conflicts between corporate priorities and American traditions of honoring those who died defending freedom, democracy, and the values that define our nation. Chapter 7. The legal gaps that leave heroes defenseless. The systematic corporate harassment that military families like Kendall Rasmussen face when trying to honor fallen soldiers reveals dangerous gaps in legal protections that should safeguard military memorials from HOA interference, but currently leave Gold Star families vulnerable to arbitrary corporate authority over patriotic expression and sacred obligations to remember those who died defending America. The freedom to display. The American Flag Act of 2005 provides some federal protection for flag displays in HOA communities, preventing management companies from completely banning American flags. But these protections don't extend to memorial posters, photographs of fallen soldiers, or other forms of military remembrance that corporate managers can attack using aesthetic violations and community standards enforcement. State laws governing HOA authority typically grant broad powers over community aesthetics and property standards without specific exemptions for military memorials or patriotic displays, creating legal frameworks where corporate managers can treat tributes to fallen heroes the same way they handle any other alleged community violation without regard for the sacred nature of military remembrance. The absence of federal legislation specifically protecting military memorials from HOA interference leaves military families dependent on inconsistent state laws that vary widely in their recognition of military sacrifice and protection for patriotic expression. This patchwork of legal protections creates unequal safeguards that fail many military families based on their geographic location. The legal classification of HOA enforcement as private contract disputes rather than public governance issues eliminates constitutional protections for freedom of expression that would apply if identical restrictions were imposed by government agencies. Military families lose First Amendment protections when they live under private corporate governance systems. The burden of proof typically falls on military families to justify their memorials rather than requiring management companies to demonstrate legitimate community interests that outweigh the importance of honoring fallen soldiers. This legal framework favors corporate aesthetic preferences over military remembrance and patriotic expression that should receive special protection. The cost of legal challenges to corporate attacks on military memorials makes effective resistance prohibitively expensive for most military families, creating practical barriers to defending sacred obligations even when legal rights might theoretically exist. Economic inequalities enable corporate harassment of families who can't afford lawyers to fight systematic abuse. The lack of specialized legal remedies for corporate interference with military memorials forces military families to pursue expensive civil litigation through general HOA dispute procedures that don't recognize the special importance of military remembrance or the unique harm caused by attacks on tributes to fallen soldiers. The absence of criminal penalties for corporate harassment of military families means that management companies face no personal consequences for systematic abuse of Gold Star families beyond potential civil liability that is expensive to pursue and difficult to obtain through legal systems that favor corporate defendants. The legal frameworks that allow HOA boards to hire professional enforcement companies using community funds create massive power imbalances where corporate entities can pursue military families with unlimited resources, while residents must fund their own defense against harassment paid for with their own HOA fees. The timing requirements that many HOAs impose on decorations, treating military memorials like seasonal displays that must be removed after arbitrary periods, lack legal recognition of the permanent nature of military loss and the ongoing obligations that Gold Star families carry to honor their fallen loved ones throughout their lives. The legal precedents that generally favor HOA authority over resident rights create judicial environments where corporate aesthetic preferences receive more legal protection than military remembrance, resulting in court outcomes that prioritize property management convenience over respect for military sacrifice and fallen heroes. The interstate nature of many HOA management companies complicates legal jurisdiction and accountability when corporate entities based in different states attack military families, creating enforcement challenges that enable systematic harassment across multiple communities and legal jurisdictions without meaningful consequences. Chapter 8. The victory that lights the path for other heroes. The overwhelming success of public resistance that forced the management company to retreat from attacking Kendall Rasmussen's Memorial Day display proves that organized community action can defeat corporate disrespect for military sacrifice and provides a powerful roadmap for other military families facing similar harassment over patriotic displays and memorials to fallen soldiers. The rapid corporate reversal within just days of launching their attack demonstrates that management company hostility to military memorials isn't based on principled positions or legitimate community interests, but opportunistic harassment that can be stopped through public accountability and organized resistance. Their quick retreat exposes the fundamental weakness of corporate authority when challenged by united communities. The management company's discovery of the 2018 conditional approval letter that had protected Kendall's memorial during patriotic holidays reveals that corporate attacks often occur due to administrative incompetence or deliberate ignorance rather than legitimate enforcement of community standards. This pattern suggests that many attacks on military families can be defeated through basic research and documentation. The corporate claim that their software system classified military memorials as nuisances represents a pathetic attempt to blame technology for human decisions while avoiding responsibility for institutional disrespect toward fallen soldiers. This excuse reveals how corporate systems can be challenged and changed when communities demand respect for military sacrifice. The speed of the corporate apology and policy reversal demonstrates that management companies understand the difference between popular and unpopular enforcement actions and will retreat quickly when faced with negative publicity and community backlash. This sensitivity to public opinion creates leverage that military families can use to protect their sacred obligations. The restoration of Kendall's right to display her memorial during extended periods covering multiple patriotic holidays represents a victory not just for her family, but for all military families facing corporate harassment over tributes to fallen soldiers. Her successful resistance establishes precedents and strategies that can protect other Gold Star families. The media attention generated by Kendall's case creates public awareness about corporate attacks on military memorials that may deter future harassment of military families while inspiring other Gold Star families to resist rather than submit to management company demands for removal of patriotic displays honoring their fallen loved ones. The neighbor support that Kendall received throughout her battle demonstrates the community solidarity that makes effective resistance possible and provides concrete examples of how residents can support military families facing corporate harassment over memorials to fallen soldiers and patriotic expressions that honor military service. The successful social media campaign that helped force corporate retreat establishes proven strategies for organizing public resistance to corporate attacks on military memorials and patriotic expression in HOA communities. These tactics can be replicated by other military families facing similar harassment. The legal and practical accommodations that Kendall has secured for her memorial create frameworks that other military families can use to protect their own tributes to fallen soldiers, while demonstrating reasonable approaches to balancing community standards with military remembrance obligations that should be sacred and permanent. The documentation of corporate harassment through news coverage and public records creates evidence that can support legislative efforts to establish stronger legal protections for military memorials and hold management companies accountable for systematic attacks on military families who seek to honor their fallen heroes. The broader public support for Kendall's fight, reflected in social media engagement, petition signatures, and news coverage, proves that most Americans value military sacrifice and will defend military families when corporate entities attack. Memorials to fallen soldiers and patriotic expressions that should be celebrated rather than eliminated. The successful resistance to corporate attacks on Kendall's memorial provides hope and inspiration for other military families facing similar harassment, while demonstrating that organized community action can defeat corporate disrespect for military sacrifice and ensure that fallen heroes receive the honor they deserve. Chapter 9. America's choice between heroes and corporate control. Kendall Rasmussen's decade-long battle to preserve her memorial to Sergeant John Kyle Daggett represents the most fundamental choice facing American communities today. Whether we will protect the sacred right to honor military sacrifice and fallen heroes, or allow corporate entities to eliminate expressions of patriotism and military remembrance in pursuit of aesthetic uniformity and administrative convenience that treats heroes as nuisances. The systematic corporate attacks on military memorials that Kendall has faced from multiple management companies reveal a broader cultural conflict between American values of military remembrance and corporate priorities that treat honoring fallen soldiers as property management problems, requiring elimination through enforcement actions that generate revenue and demonstrate authority over residents. The corporate classification of memorials to fallen American heroes as nuisances, comparable to dead plants, demonstrates how completely some business entities have abandoned respect for military sacrifice in favor of administrative efficiency, that treats expressions of patriotism as aesthetic violations, requiring immediate removal, regardless of their meaning to military families. The timing of corporate attacks on military memorials during patriotic holidays like Memorial Day reveals either deliberate hostility to military values or complete insensitivity to the significance of these occasions for military families and American communities that should honor rather than harass those who have lost loved ones in service to freedom. The corporate resistance to accommodating military memorials, even when faced with overwhelming public pressure and community support, exposes management company priorities that place aesthetic control above respect for fallen soldiers and demonstrates systematic rather than accidental disrespect for military sacrifice and Gold Star families who carry permanent obligations to remember their heroes. The legal gaps that enable corporate harassment of military families seeking to honor fallen soldiers create urgent needs for legislative action that establishes clear protections for military memorials and patriotic expression, while holding management companies accountable for attacks on military remembrance that should be sacred and protected by law. The successful public resistance that has protected Kendall's memorial in both 2018 and 2025 proves that organized community action can defeat corporate disrespect for military sacrifice and provides proven strategies for other military families facing similar harassment over tributes to fallen heroes who died defending American freedom and values. The neighbor support that Kendall has received throughout her battles demonstrates that most Americans still value military sacrifice and will defend military families when corporate entities attack memorials to fallen soldiers, proving that corporate disrespect doesn't represent community sentiment, but arbitrary management preferences that can be challenged and defeated. The media attention generated by Kendall's case has created national awareness about corporate attacks on military memorials that may inspire legislative action to protect military families while deterring future harassment of Gold Star families, trying to honor their fallen loved ones through patriotic displays and memorial tributes. The precedents established through Kendall's successful resistance provide legal and practical frameworks that other military families can use to protect their own memorials while demonstrating effective strategies for organizing community support against corporate harassment of patriotic expression that honors military service and sacrifice. The broader implications of allowing corporate attacks on military memorials extend beyond individual families to national values and cultural respect for military service, creating fundamental questions about whether American communities will honor those who died defending freedom or prioritize corporate aesthetic preferences over sacred obligations to remember fallen heroes. The choice facing every American community is whether to support military families like Kendall's who seek to honor fallen heroes or enable corporate entities that treat memorials to American soldiers as property management problems requiring elimination through arbitrary enforcement actions that show contempt for military sacrifice. The victory that Kendall has achieved through persistent resistance and community support provides hope for other military families while demonstrating that corporate disrespect for military sacrifice can be defeated when Americans unite to defend the right to honor fallen heroes who gave their lives for freedom. Here's what the HOA never saw coming. Kendall's fight just sparked a massive nationwide movement. Military families across America are now using her exact strategy to defeat corporate bullies, and the results are absolutely stunning. Management companies everywhere. But the biggest shock? This memorial to one fallen soldier has now protected hundreds of military families from HOA harassment. Corporate managers are panicking as communities nationwide rally behind their local heroes. The simple truth that terrifies every HOA. When Americans unite to defend our fallen heroes, corporate cowards always retreat. Smash subscribe if you believe our heroes deserve honor, not harassment. Share this story to protect military families in your community. They need to see this. Strategy.